Hello everyone, this is Professor DePaulo welcoming you back to Site 265 Fully Online. And today I'm going to be talking about how to write the method section of the APA manuscript. So once again, this is based off of the class study, which is that survey that you took online a few weeks ago, and it has to do with variables that are related to behaviors that help prevent the spread of COVID. And we talked about how that's important in the introduction, and a lot of the introductions were pretty good. Some of them were missing a lot of information, some studies that were missing. Remember, in the introduction, you were supposed to find one study per hypothesis out of the 5 hypotheses that we were testing. And some people did this, which was great. Some people did not, which is not as great. And so they have to go back and fix it. So you can always look at my feedback for each section of the paper. I give plenty of feedback. And the more problems with the paper, the more feedback I give. Right? So it's not just your score. You can get my feedback. I write comments. I also mark up the paper in various ways. So you should be able to download that and see my comments and feedback for the paper, and then you can revise it. The revised paper is due at the end of the semester, so my suggestion is that you revise each part of the paper once you get feedback, so that when the end of the semester comes, you already have most of it revised, and you're not overwhelmed with it, and you can put that time into studying for the final instead. And so that's how the introduction went. Like I said, some of them were very good. Some of them were not as good. They need to be improved. Some people didn't cite, which is very important. If you don't cite, it's technically plagiarism. Some people didn't cover the 5 hypotheses. Some of the writing wasn't as good. So if I'm writing comments in your paper along the way of you need to improve your writing, or you need to fix this, you need to structure this better, that is to help you. Because at BMCC, this is a place where you can get, some things corrected before you move on to the 4-year or the senior college, where there's going to be less help available. It's going to be more intense. There's going to be less support. So when I say things in the paper commenting that you need to take care of this, or go to the writing center, or structurally you're not, providing me something that's easy to read, that's just sort of to support you to go, get the help that you need now, so that when you move into the 4-year college, that you're going to be okay. Okay, so that's not so feedback is feedback. It's not personal. It's not critical. It's more that I'm trying to help you. And I get my own feedback. Like I said, I get my feedback from reviewers, and they're much harsher to me. So I may write like, this is not good. You need to fix this. You need to fix this. I may have questions like, I don't understand what you're talking about here. That is not a critical feedback. That is just to guide you. That's to help you. So you have to kind of take that and say, okay, I'll try to make it better, rather than say, while the professor is mean to me, he gave me this criticism. It's not being mean. It's to help you. And if you make the changes that I suggest, you'll do better on the final paper. Because when I grade the final paper, I look at those comments that I made, and then I go and I look at what you've changed. And if you completely ignore my suggestions, your paper is not going to be as good. And so therefore your final paper is going to have a lower grade. If you incorporate my suggestions and make the suggested changes, you're going to have a better paper. So please look at my comments and make the suggested changes for the final paper, because that's the best way to learn. Is you submit something, okay, it's a tough assignment, the introduction is difficult. You submit it, and then you revise and you resubmit, and you learn to make it better that way. That's how it always works. So that's all I'm going to say about the introduction. Now for the method, thankfully, it's a much easier section to write. So this is where you shouldn't have a problem with the method. It's very simple, especially for this kind of study, because all we're doing is a survey. So there's not much going on. The method really talks about who the participants in the study are and what the study's about. So what do the participants have to do? So if I was running a behavioral study or I was running a neuroscience study where we're doing brain scans and weighting different images and it's very complex, then the procedure is going to be very dense. And it's going to lay out all the minutiae of what we're doing. But in this case, we're doing something so simple. We're just doing a survey. So the procedure is really, there's not much going on. This is not the case for all psychological studies, but for a survey, it's very basic. So we're going to do a very basic method section. It's going to take you about 10 minutes to write. So what do we do first? So there's 3 subsections of method. So I'm going to open up Microsoft Word and let's take a look at how to write method. So I'm going to start with the title, the major header, which is method. And I want to have this in a regular font. I can do Times New Roman. Let's do 12 points, right? Method looks good like that, right? Centered. In plain text with a capital M. They're going to have 3 subsections or 3 subheaders, and they're going to be in italics. So participants, we're going to have that, and those subheaders are going to be flush left. So you should have a 1-inch margin here on the left side, and you're just going to justify it left, right? So don't center it. It should be left justified. I'm going to have participants. I'm going to have materials, capital M. This is why it's going to be so easy to write this. And a procedure. Now, don't put a colon after this. Don't put a hyphen. Just leave it like this. Make sure all of these 3 are in italics. Let me just do one at a time. Make sure they're in italics. Okay, then start in regular type, so get rid of the italics, and start on the line below each subheader. Don't start next to participants, start on the line below. So who are the participants? Well, you're going to write this in full sentences. You're going to write a couple of full sentences, but I'm going to give you the rundown here. So you're going to write full sentences. I'm not going to write full sentences here because I'm just giving you the information. So there were 22 total participants. I'm just writing it out here. You're going to write this in full sentences. 18 were female. Spelling is not my strength here. 4 male, right? What else do we know? We know that 6 were African American. So I'm giving gender information. I'm giving ethnicity information. 3 Asian. This was self-identified, obviously. This is what people wrote on the survey. 1 Hawaiian Pacific Islander. Why is it important to know who's in your study? Because they may react differently, right? So gender may play a role in how people perform, and ethnicity or race can play a role in how people perform on whatever task that you're having them do. We're not hypothesizing any of this in this study, per se. We're not looking at gender or race, ethnicity, but it's a possibility, and I think, you know, the general audience who's reading the article should know who's in the study. Is it, you know, a homogeneous study, right, or is it diverse? And since it's from BMCC, it's a fairly diverse sample, although it's skewed heavily with 18 female and only 4 male. Ideally, we'd want that to be a little bit more balanced, but in psychology, there's just a preponderance of women compared to men. 8 Hispanic and Latino. And we have 4 white. Okay, if you were taking a sample at another school in the middle of the country, you may have 85 to 90% white. And so then your sample would be skewed as a a homogeneous group in terms of white. And obviously race can play a role in certain things, and so it's good to have a diverse sample if possible. I mean, that's my opinion on things. And you have that naturally at BMCC, except for the preponderance of women compared to men. But you have that problem everywhere. There's just so many more female psychology students these days. So those are participants. You're going to write this out in a couple sentences, full sentences. Don't just list it like I listed here. You're going to write sentences because it has to be written in full sentences. Materials. So the materials section describes what you're using. And we're using a survey. And you got to describe what the survey is about. So the survey is about COVID health behaviors. COVID's capitalized, by the way, the C in COVID. Now, what did it measure? Mentioned some of the variables it measured. It measured social distancing, it measured mask wearing. Measured attachment. Measured alexithymia, measured anxiety, measured empathy. Right. So we listed most of the variables it's measured. So it was a survey measuring COVID-related health behavior. A survey of COVID. Let's not use measuring twice. That sounds weird. Of COVID-19 health behaviors, measuring social distancing, mask wearing, attachment style, alexithymia, anxiety, empathy. Write this in a full sentence. If you could write a better sentence than this, write a better sentence. I'm just kind of jotting down just thoughts onto here for you. Procedure, you don't need to mention the survey again. You just want to mention that what the survey was for and how long it took. So you can say something along the lines of something like that. It took about 30 minutes to complete, and was given as part of a course in behavioral research. Okay. For participants, you could also write, I forgot to mention, you could also write that these participants were recruited from a psychology class. It's good to know where where you're getting your sample from, and that basically tells you it's a convenient sample because it was recruited from a psychology class, and therefore it couldn't be a random sample. Ideally, it would be a random sample, but in most research, we're not getting random samples because they're pretty hard to obtain, and they can be quite expensive depending on where you're going for the sample. So most psychological studies use convenient samples, which aren't always ideal. So what that tells you is that the convenient sample limits the generalizability of your findings. So if I'm finding some kind of interesting results with a sample of BMCC students, I have to be careful about generalizing that to the entire population because the BMCC student population might be different than the general population, or even the general population of college students. And in particular, psychology students might be even different than the general population of BMCC students. So you're more limited. If with a convenience sample, you're more limited with how I'm going to generalize the results. Um, what that's called is external validity. The ability to generalize results from the sample to the population is external validity. With the convenience sample, you have lower external validity. That's a problem, right? Could you do a random sample at BMCC? Would that be better? Yeah, but if I did a random sample, I'd have to get people on the weekend. I'd have to get people at night, in the morning. I'd have to track down people. It's a lot more work. That would be better, a better sample. Does it really change the results of the study? Not really. It doesn't change the results of the study. You can still find results. You can find interesting things. You just have to be careful about how you generalize it. And that brings up the point of replication. So if you're using a convenience sample like we are, ideally you would replicate your study, your findings. So that means basically do the study again with a different sample and see if you get the same results. And hopefully you replicate. A lot of people don't. And that creates what's called the replication problem in psychology, where since people aren't replicating, they're publishing, and then other people, other scientists, other researchers are carrying out the study, and they're trying to replicate your study that you published, and they're not getting the same results. And the problem is it might be sample specific at that point. And since you didn't replicate, they're replicating, but they're using a different sample, and they're getting something different. And then who's right and who's wrong. So replication is important. Unfortunately, it's not done as much as it should be because you can't publish most of the time. The vast majority of times you can't publish a replication. So people are not going to spend time and resources and money on it if it can't be published, because publication is very important at a university and college level. And if you can't publish it, what's the point of replicating it? And that creates the problem we're in, where things are not necessarily replicating. But that's kind of an aside to what we're doing. In this participant, you want to mention where it's from. Psychology class at the Borough Manhattan Community College. BMCC. But you don't want to write BMCC out, because people are not going to know what BMCC is. If you go to a conference, you say, I'm at BMCC, and they're like, what's that? People outside of New York City don't know BMCC. Even people in New York City don't know BMCC. So you got to tell them what it is. Now, in parentheses, you could write BMCC. If you wanted to talk about it later, they now know what BMCC is. But we're going to write it out so we know Borough of Manhattan Community College, they know what that is. Right, there's actually another BMCC somewhere in I don't know if it's on the West Coast. And it's, I think it's in like Denver or something. It's BMCC, and if you were from that BMCC, you'd be really confused about our BMCC. So, Borough of Manhattan Community College. And that's it. That's very simple. And I've kind of, just make sure you write these in complete sentences. I'm giving you the answer, basically, because it's very basic. There's not much to write. I have to provide you the details, and those are the details, right? So this should not be an issue at all. Just make sure you format it. Let me get rid of the extra space here, so it looks like it's all spaced properly. That looks good. Make sure that's centered. Make sure this is in italics. Make sure there's no colons or hyphens. Make sure it's lined up like this. I wouldn't want to start with a number. So you don't want to start a sentence with a number. So I can write 20. If I could spell it, I can write it. 22. And I'll just usually write like this. N is 22. That's how we specify the sample. Let me just lowercase that. Total participants. So if I were to start a sentence with a number, I'd like to spell it out. So I'd write 22 instead of the number 22 to start the sentence. And any number less than 10, you want to spell it out. And any number starting at the beginning of the sentence, you want to spell it out. So those are just stylistic rules, and that's it. So you have participants, materials, procedure, and this should take you about 10 minutes to do. I will put the link up. You will submit this, save it as a PDF, submit the assignment as a PDF, and I will give you feedback, but this is kind of a no-brainer. You should not have a problem with this. This should be a 10 out of 10, right? At the very worst, if something goes horribly wrong, a 9 out of 10. Anything less than a 9 out of 10 on something like this, it's just, you're not paying attention. You're not following the directions. Following directions is very important for this class, because that's what it is. You're learning a bunch of different things you don't know before. You have to follow the directions. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible for you, but you still have to follow the directions. If you have any questions, after you save this as a PDF, you're going to upload it to Blackboard under the Assignments tab. So if you go to Assignments, you'll see, you see the introduction here. I'm going to make another submission, turn it in for Method. You're going to just upload it as a PDF. I also have Method Guide here, so you can see this on paper, although what I'm providing you in the video is basically the answer to the assignment. It's a very basic assignment. So that'll be it for the method. If you have any questions, you can email me. If not, I'll give you as much feedback as I can after I get these assignments. I've graded most of the introductions, if not all of them. So you should have feedback there. And then we'll start working on I'll start working on the results personally, and the next assignment after this will be the discussion. And that'll be a little harder to write. That'll be similar to writing the introduction, but based on our current results. So that'll be a more challenging assignment. So get your points here. These are free points. Take them. And we'll move on to more difficult things later on. And if you have any questions, let me know. If not, bye for now. See you online next time.